This thing on.
If you like rock music, punk, metal or blues, then you've come to the right place, because we like it too. It's Soundcheck. It's Soundcheck. It's Soundcheck. Check, check, check.
I love it. Great.
Peace. And welcome to Soundcheck, Central Michigan Life's rock and roll and alternative music podcast. For the listener, I'm wearing my John Lennon glasses, and I am here with my wonderful co-host whose name starts with A.
I believe that is me, Andrew Mullen.
And our other co-host, who is a far bigger John Lennon fan than I.
Michael Livingston.
I have put on my circular glasses today that kind of make me look more like Willy Wonka than John Lennon. To introduce this, what is effectively a mini episode from us, which hasn't really happened before, or if it has, it's been a very rare occurrence. Essentially, within the last week, we started working on another episode of Record Roulette. I ran into COVID and I am now in quarantine, and we didn't want to do the rest of that episode over Zoom. We would much prefer to do it in person once it's safe to do. So doing this mini episode, the concept of which I'm going to explain after everyone does their housekeeping. So do you want to do some housekeeping for us, Andrew, in terms of social media?
Sure. Well, you can follow us on @SCheck Official on Twitter. You can follow me at Andrew Mullen 4.
Follow me at Michael C. Live.
And you can't.
And to plug in our most recent episodes. Last time you heard us, we were talking to our wonderful friend Ben Solis all about the thrash metal, particularly Beyond the Big Four. If you had to listen to that, please go do so. It's one of my favorite episodes we've done because I'm a big fan of the genre, and I think it was a lot of fun. So just go check that out. And I believe before that, we did short songs. Correct? That was the episode
Sounds
before. Right. We talked about songs under a minute and a half. If you want to go hear that, which you should, it was a lot of fun. Go check that out. And hear whether or not if you would go on the U.S.S.R cruise. I suppose that's a meme now. We didn't ask Ben Solis if you'd go on the U.S.S R cruise. Maybe we should text him, and then we can hear it back later. I don't know. But yeah, nope. I think that's everything that I can think of.
Yeah. So why this episode is happening, basically, in short, is we just needed something to fill the space. And I thought this would be a fun little craft. When the world is normal, old ladies especially, they love to get together and do some crafting. And what's the goal of crafting or taking a painting class or something like that? It's not usually to be a great artist. It's just to create something that's your own out of an idea that exists already. So basically, what we're doing today is our own version of musical crafting. We're taking the Beatles' White Album, which is their longest album and was originally a double LP, and we're each cutting it down to around 45 minutes, which is about the length of a single LP. So essentially, we're portraying what we would have liked the Beatles' White Album to sound like if it was a single LP. Later on, we're going to talk about whether or not it should have been a single LP at all. But first, we're going to kind of run down each of our track lists. We're just going to discuss the songs in general and what we were trying to do with each of our White Albums. I think that's really everything. Does everyone understand what we're doing?
Aye, Captain.
Excellent.
So as well.
Okay. So since I am the leader today, as uncomfortable as that is for me, I am going to talk about my White Album first. You should be pulled out onto the big screen now if you're watching on video so you can see.
Now, Ben, real quick, though, before you go, I don't know if you explained it. So generally, how are we narrowing down, the general idea is if you were to narrow this down to one LP, one final record, if you were to say, of the White Album, all the songs on there, exactly what do you mean by that? How long should your version be? How are we doing it based on sides of the records? Kind of explain that real quick.
Okay, so if you want to do this yourself, and if you want to really understand the method behind the madness of what we did, basically there's a limit to the amount of music you can put on the side of a record. I'm sure most people who are familiar with records know that. It's around 23 minutes. And the White Album was of a length that about each side of side A, B, C, and D of the White Album was 23 minutes. So essentially, what we're doing is just making two 23-ish minute segments of music, and that's your side one and your side two of your single LP. So I think we were doing the length of these anywhere from like 45 minutes. 45 minutes was like the average. I think minus 46. Andrews is like 46 or 47.
47.
Michael's was a little shorter, but we sort of based it off of the LPs that shipped with the White Album in the first place, but also just the Beatles' previous records in terms of length. And then I at least attempted to sequence mine for vinyl, and we'll talk about, you know, where side one starts and ends and where side two starts and ends for each of us if we decided to set up our playlist in that way. But I think that's pretty clear, right?
Enough talk. Let's talk Beatles.
Okay. The most basic Soundcheck episode ever, question mark. Okay, so mine first. I will just run down the song titles. We're not going to be playing much music today, so if you've never heard the Beatles before, then go listen to it. Okay, so mine starts off back in the U.S.S.R., followed up by Dear Prudence, so nothing's changed so far. Then we got Martha, My Dear, I'm So Tired in the 4th track position. 5th track, Cry Baby Cry. 6th track, Happiness is a Warm Gun. 7th track, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And closing out the first side is I Will. Then the second side kicks off with Helter Skelter, followed by the palate cleanser, Why Don't We Do It in the Road. Rocky Raccoon is after that. Then Honey Pie as the 4th track of side 2. The 5th side of track 2 is Julia. The 6th is Blackbird. The 7th is Long, Long, Long. And as on the original White Album, it closes off with Good Night. But this is an alternate take from the deluxe edition of the White Album that was released in 2018. That's my track listing. And generally, what I was trying to do, well, first of all, I was trying to cut out what I view as the filler, which I think we all were. But I was also not purposefully focusing on Paul because he's my favorite Beatle. It just kind of happened that way. And then I sort of went for, I like the 1-2 punch that Back in the U.S.S.R. Dear Prudence has. So I kept that. And then I sort of would have the side kind of tail off. It goes from Back in the U.S.S.R. to Dear Prudence to some softer stuff. Martha, My Dear, I'm So Tired, Cry Baby Cry. And it amps up a little bit at the end with Happiness is a Warm Gun and While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And I'm a really big fan of short songs that end sides of albums, so I put I Will there. And then you sort of see the same thing happening again, where you have some harder rocking stuff like Helter Skelter, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, kind of plods along in a rocking sort of way. Then Rocky Raccoon can go a little hard with that saloon piano, and then it sort of tails off into more ballady stuff and leaves you with the very pleasant take 10 of Good Night at the end. So I was just kind of basing it off of track listings that I've seen otherwise, with a wild disregard for things like how many McCartney songs versus how many Lennon songs. I was just sort of, those get stacked together a lot of the time. Like I think I have 3 Lennon songs in a row at one point. I think I have 3 or 4 McCartney songs in a row at one point. Maybe, 4. So that's kind of what I did. I don't know.
Do you have anything to say, Michael, about Ben's layout?
Is there anything egregious that I left out? Is there anything that I should have cut?
I like yours a lot, Ben. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you put this together long before this episode started, right?
This was something I was doing over quarantine. Originally, I did this with the Clash's Sandinista as well, but I sort of reconfigured it for this episode. I added a little, I moved stuff around, so it's retooled from when I originally made it.
Do you feel like there's a strong progression between the loud and the soft and dynamic wise? Because that is something I really tried to shoot for on mine, kind of giving sort of variety of different dynamics, sound, song structure, or did you find yourself gravitating to one of the Beatles' many shades of sound that we see on the White Album?
I definitely noticed that I am more inclined to go for the ballady kind of stuff. And I like the pastiche stuff too. Like Martha, My Dear is doing sort of a music hall kind of thing that Paul liked to do, or Happiness is a Warm Gun is doing kind of a doo-wop thing. I like when they would dip into genres like that. And I just really like really good ballad stuff like Julia and Blackbird, and Long, Long, Long is kind of ballady too. I like those kinds of songs from this album especially. I thought that they were writing really well, and there was a soft psychedelic element to Long, Long, Long that you don't hear very much else in their discography. There's a lot of sweetness here without it getting too overly sweet a lot of the time. That can definitely happen with stuff like Paul, but I like that too. So definitely tended towards the ballads.
Yeah, that is something I noticed, kind of how you structured this one. You know, it kind of starts off kind of high energy with Back in the U.S.S.R. I think all of us started, didn't really change that opener. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but okay, so all of us did. But, you know, I noticed, and I kind of did the opposite with mine. We'll get some, I'll kind of explain that more. We did it in a second, but you kind of had your album trail off in a way. You kind of like got it, made it go softer. You kind of introduced a lot of this ballads towards the end of your record, end of the run. You started off side 2 with Helter Skelter, which is obviously the most insane songs ever written. And then you kind of gradually decreased it with energy as you went down, which is interesting. I think that's a really interesting way of doing it. I guess, was there a particular reason why you wanted to kind of have your record end like that?
It was just the way that it ended up happening. What I did is I just put the whole album in a playlist, and then I went through and cut out stuff that I definitely didn't want. I was like, okay, continuing story of Bungalow Bill, Wild Honey Pie, I definitely don't need these things in my single LP. And then I just sort of had to find a way to fit it together. Helter Skelter was definitely the hardest piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
Because you cannot resist that song. I couldn't take it out of the White Album. That would be blasphemous. But I was having trouble connecting it to the rest of my album. Enter, probably my most questionable choice, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, which I was able to use, I think, if you listen to it in the order I have it in. Helter Skelter leads off the side, and then Why Don't We Do It in the Road still has the like rock blues kind of elements, but it does it in an instrumental style that's more similar to the rest of side 2. So it's a short song and serves as kind of a bridge between the craziness of Helter Skelter and the rest of my side, which never again comes close to hitting the energy levels of Helter Skelter.
One thing I'm kind of seeing is like when I'm looking at Helter Skelter, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, and Rocky Raccoon all in an order, I like that you're kind of saving these, because I view all 3 of those songs as really like kind of like funny, serious, like there's so many different flavors of lyricism there, but all are pretty profound. And just Why Don't We Do It in the Road is not profound per se, but like it's putting like kind of a like humorous nod into it somewhere. So you're saving all of these secrets and these sort of like Easter eggs for the second half of the LP, which I think if this was something like this was to come out would really improve the listening experience. I don't know. That's just something I'm noticing right now. And I think I can really admire about just like the track structure and, you know, envisioning myself flipping over the album to side B and really getting blown away by how that's ordered.
Right. Thank you. I was definitely thinking a lot about Helter Skelter and putting it in here somewhere because I toyed with the idea of that opening the album. And then I was just like, that's insane, especially for if you put yourself back in 1968 and you buy the new Beatles album and that's the first thing you hear. It would be, I don't know if it would necessarily be off-putting, but it would at the least be very, very surprising. And I didn't want to alienate the listener right away with something like that. I wanted to kind of give them the first side, which tends a little bit more towards what the Beatles had been doing, and then the second side gets a little bit further out there as opposed to what they were doing. So I don't know. That's kind of what I have. If I was going to play one song from this side, I would really like to play. I think the big standout is Take 10 of Good Night. It was when the band was kind of doing it, and there are it's not as heavy of an emphasis on the strings, and also Paul is helping Ringo sing it, which I think helps the song out a lot. Like, I think Good Night is a pretty interesting way to end the White Album, but to me that version is a lot fuller. Without having all the overtop string stuff, it sounds a lot fuller. Also, the guitar part harkens back to Dear Prudence, so it's kind of bookending the album with something like that. The other thing I'd like to point out, and there's a version of it on this reissue, the 2018 reissue with all the bonus tracks, but there's a version of Revolution. My personal favorite is Take 20, where you start with the acoustic version that we know as Revolution 1, and over the 10 minutes in length that it is, it kind of turns into the avant-garde track of Revolution number 9. And I think when you listen to that full take, you get more of an idea of what they were trying to do with that song as opposed to what it ended up being on the album, which is a little insufferable in my opinion. But that's really, I think that's everything with my version, unless anyone else has anything to say.
No, I want to see Andrew's now, because I
Right.
think now that I got the dissection of all this, I'm interested to see the angles that or the goals that Andrew tried to accomplish with his.
Excellent.
Oh, all right. So, as I said, it is my turn now to read off my version of this. So, first off, I think like everyone else, back in the U.S.S.R. Then it goes into Glass Onion. Then it goes to I never pronounced this one right. Obladi, oblada, whatever. Then it goes into Dear Prudence, Martha, My Dear, the continuing story of Bungalow Bill, Happiness is a Warm Gun, I'm So Tired, and then to end off, side 1 is Blackbird. Side 2 begins with Long, 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 then Savoy Truffle, Your Blues, Helter Skelter, Julia, and it ends off with While My Guitar Gently Weeps. So it's a lot to unpack here, kind of how I ordered some stuff. So kind of probably one of the more controversial picks right up top is that I kind of separated Dear Prudence and Back in the U.S.S.R. And originally I had them together at the start because, Back in the U.S.S.R. is a perfect opener. Why would I change that? And Dear Prudence, and it bleeds right into Dear Prudence. However, I've never been a fan of albums that have like such energetic openers. Something like Back in the U.S.S.R. It's not the most energetic song on the record, I know, but it's still pretty high energy comparatively to the rest of the record. And just having that go right into like a slower song like Dear Prudence, I mean, I know it builds, but it just always just kind of like kills an album's momentum to me. I think Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden does the same thing, going from Invaders to Children of the Damned. So to kind of like to kind of quell my own annoyance with that kind of stuff, I kind of moved that one further down. I wanted to keep Glass Onion. I don't know if I know Ben, you didn't. Michael, did you keep Glass Onion in your playlist? No, I mean I've always liked Glass Onion because it's just another installment in the long-running series of John Lennon writing pointless, goofy novelty songs that don't mean anything to annoy Beatle fans who overanalyze lyrics, which I've always appreciated. So like I Am the Walrus does the same thing. So I've always loved that track, and it's got a really cool opener. So with like the drums and whatnot. So I kept that in there. Kind of kept the energy going on with Obladi. I kept that one there. I almost cut that one. It's a bit annoying, but whatever. I left it there, and then kind of to bring things a little calmer, I went to Dear Prudence, Martha, My Dear, Canoe Story of Bungalow Bill. I actually found myself really enjoying it because if I may indeed consult, if I can find it, my handy dandy Beatles Bible here. It's I have all the songs, the story behind every Beatles release. If you've never, it's a big book, but if you ever get your hands on it, I would definitely recommend looking through it because it's a really interesting insight to literally every song written by the Beatles. I think there's one for Dylan and Zeppelin too. So, but yeah, I think in this book I read that John was kind of inspired when, because obviously a lot of this record was written when they were all in their weird excursion over to India to like meditate and do stuff. And like when John was there, he heard about this guy who like between each meditation sessions, he would go out and like hunt for tigers, which, you know, seemed, it's not necessarily an animal rights song, but I kind of view it as an interesting look into human, what's the word?
Like trophy hunting?
No, hypocrisy, human hypocrisy. So that's what I meant to say. But yeah, so I always appreciated that, and I think it kind of fits with this weird, demented tone of Happiness is a Warm Gun. So I put those together. I think I'm So Tired is just a perfect lead off from those tracks. And then kind of on the happier side of things, Blackbird, which I think is a really undervalued protest song from the Beatles category. They didn't really write a lot of great ones, to be honest. So I think Blackbird definitely stays. And then we get into some of the George songs. Anyone who knows me knows that George Harrison's my favorite Beatles. So I went with Savoy Truffle and Long, Long, Long kind of together. And at this point, this is where I kind of wanted to build up to Helter Skelter, because it's such a monumental just gut punch. You know, it's one of the first ever arguably hard rock and heavy metal tracks. So from the beginning of side 2, I kind of let from Long, Long, Long to Helter Skelter. I kind of wanted to build up to it. So I went to Savoy Truffle, which rocks a little harder, but still kind of goofy. Then you get to Your Blues, which is kind of this really groovy, kind of heavy, you know, blues rock track from Lennon that I really like, into Helter Skelter. And then but I really wanted to offset Helter Skelter, you know, its wild manic craziness, with something completely relaxing and gentle. That's why I went with Julia. It's a great acoustic ballad, which, by the way, according to my book, is the only solo John track in the entire Beatles. I'm done with that joke. And then to end it off, I went with While My Guitar Gently Weeps, because I will not argue this. It is the best song on the whole record. I know that's a bit of a pleb choice, but and again, kind of biased because I'm a big Harrison fan as well as a Clapton fan when it comes to his guitar playing, not necessarily the person. But no, it's not only is it a great track, but it's also a wonderful emotional high, which I feel like if you want a great album closer, you end off with the emotional high point. So to really make the album memorable. So that's why I ended it with While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Really, as far as like what to keep, I was kind of, obviously I wanted to cut the fat per se, cut the pointless guff, which, sorry, Ben, meant a lot of Paul songs had to go, because as much as I love Paul's stuff in the 70s, and I think he wrote a lot of great Beatle tracks, and especially nearing this point when we're talking about the White Album and Sgt. Pepper's, Paul had a lot of garbage. And granted, John did too on Sgt. Pepper's. I will argue that is the most overrated Beatles record, but that's a conversation for another day. So obviously a lot of the stuff had to go. Wasn't out of bias, just I think I just don't need Wild Honey Pie and Why Don't We Do It in the Road and other crap I don't even remember. Although that's not to say John didn't have any pointless stuff here. Sexy Sadie, Revolution 9. Of course, Piggies. As much as I'm a big George fan, I removed Piggies. You know, that was the one George song I removed. I only had 4 on this, which is criminal if you ask me. But the lyrics are half baked, although the instrumental was nice. And Ringo's only track, Don't Pass Me By, it's just this weird, poorly sung kind of country song. So, I think there is a lot of, and we'll probably talk about this more at the end, but I think there's a lot of stuff that had to be cut from here. But I also wanted to keep some sort of variety, because I feel like trying to make the album more cohesive would kind of defeat the purpose of the White Album. So I still kept some variety, still kept some oddness to it, but kind of cut out the pointless crap. So that is my take on the White Album. What do you guys have to say about that?
Well, the first thing that I noticed when you sent this in is there's a big disparity in terms of number of tracks between your first side and your second side. I noticed that you tended to have the longer stuff on the second side. So your first side has what? 1, 2, 8
Yeah, a lot of the shorter songs are up top.
8 tracks, and then the second side is 6 tracks, and 3 of those are at least 4 minutes. So I was wondering, sort of, what's your goal with that? Having a longer, or just an A side that's the same length but with more songs, and then a B side that takes its time a little bit more, you could say.
I think for me, it's just it just kind of ended up like that. That wasn't really like the idea. It's just kind of I like the idea of having, starting off with something that first side, starting off with something kind of energetic like back in the U.S.S.R. and kind of ending with something soft and sweet like Blackbird. And I wanted something to build up to Helter Skelter. I don't know why that ended up kind of just being it towards the end, but I kind of like the idea of having, kind of a good chunk of the album building up to that track. It again, kind of while my guitar gently weeps, it's the emotional high point of the record, and I feel like, again, if you want to end an album strong, that's where you put that track. So
Hmm.
it just kind of like what I wanted to do with this record is kind of how it ended up, kind of like how the decides were divided up. Ended up that a lot of the shorter songs, like you said, are towards the top. So that's kind of how it ended up being divided. There wasn't really anything to that.
Hmm. And then also, why did you pick Long, Long, Long to start off your second side? What was the reasoning behind that?
Because Long 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 had a bit of a build. I mean, maybe Dear Prudence would have been a nice one to put there instead, but it had a bit of a build that could have led into something like Savoy Truffle, which I know, like, thematically they're very different songs, but in terms of musicality, I feel like the Long 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 had this kind of weird, crazy, loud ending, and I think that was a good indicator of how this side of the record was going to go towards Helter
Hmm.
Skelter. So I think that's why I kind of
Oh,
had to
okay.
start off with that one.
Yeah.
It,
Michael.
yeah, a compliment I want to give is I really admire how I know George is your favorite Beatle. You make it very known, Andrew, but you still didn't like outright put favoritism in this track list towards George. You ended it with "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," which is a nice homage. It's a perfect send off. I agree. Looking back, I think I might have ended off my album with putting that there too if I went back and restructured it. But that's something that's really hard to avoid, especially for hardcore Beatles fans. Is like it would have been so easy for Ben, and Ben did this too, to really favor Paul. It would have
Hmm.
been, and this is something I actually did in mine. Is you tend to see I favored John, so I like how you took a pretty objective take on this. I like how the songs flow. I like how you're trying to. Whereas Ben was trying to start on a high point and kind of go down a slope, you kind of took the reverse, starting out on the B side with some slower stuff and then building up to Helter Skelter. I think it would make a really good listening experience. Um, and yeah, I think it's really funky how you sort of had the shorter songs on the A side and the longer songs on the B side, to kind of make the A side accessible for a listener who wants to show this off to a friend, who wants to go through a couple songs, quickly and kind of give a taste of a flavor of all the rainbow sounds that the Beatles have. And then
Hmm.
on the B side, you save these sort of like more experimental and really more art pieces for the second half, which I think is really cool. So good job, Andrew.
Yeah. Something I was surprised by in looking at yours, Andrew. Um, the big surprise for me, I would say there are two, is that you have Obla Di, Obla Da, and Martha, My Dear. Those are two songs that I would picture, from knowing the kind of Paul stuff you tend to not like. Those are two things that I would imagine you wouldn't have. So
Well, they
tell
were
me about.
definitely on the chopping block if I had to
Mm,
shorten it. But yeah, I Ubla Z is not among my favorite Beatle tracks, although I really love the chorus. In the verses, I think there is this whimsical happiness to it, and it felt like it was an actually well written piece of music, unlike something like Wild Honey Pie or what Why Don't You Do in the Road. Just felt like just weird things he hammered out in like 5 minutes, and it just serves no purpose whatsoever. I feel like that actually is a really properly fleshed out track. And Arth, my dear, like I think has kind of the best of Blood D without like kind of being dumb. I kind of like the weird bounciness to it. I can appreciate a lot of the bouncier, happier tracks from Paul. It's just a lot of times he ties it into weird stuff like trying to think of a Halsey. When I'm 64, can't stand that track.
Hmm.
Absolutely hate it. Because it's just, I don't know, the idea just seems really stupid to me, lyrically. But Martha, My Dear is a nice, sweet song. So I think he wrote it for his dog, which is actually kind of sweet. You know, you hear a lot of rock stars writing about their dogs. So I don't know. That's. I mean, I liked him enough. I thought, again, I wanted to keep some variety, so that's why I kept them.
And that definitely my keeping of things like why don't we do it in the road definitely shows. First of all, obviously my proclivity for McCartney, but then also like my love of albums like his debut solo album that have sort of a ramshackle, unfinished nature to them. So I I see both sides of the argument definitely. Do you have anything else, Michael?
I'm good.
Then
I'm good too. Let's hear Michael's. I want to see this.
So this my list is right away. You see that it's a lot shorter than Andrew and Ben's. I wanted to accomplish a number of goals with this track list. One, I wanted to highlight experimentation on my part. We're turning back to the craft analogy. I wanted mine to kind of be the obscure Art Deco looking piece of shit. So there's a lot of jerking back and forth between slow songs and hard songs. You'll notice that it's short. It's a short collection of just good tracks in general. You have all the hits that you want on here, starting with Back in the U.S.S.R., going into Obla D. Then I also wanted to take a lot of the rarities, specifically instrumentals, and somehow tie them in and sort of make it like a short, but also like a short album, but also kind of make it a concept piece. So I put Lady Madonna instrumentals with just piano and drums. I did While My Guitar Gently Weeps after that. And then I did Julia. And to close out side A would have been Rocky Raccoon. Starting on side B with Good Night, a slow start, and then immediately punching you in the face with Helter Skelter. I don't know why, but I wanted to do that. And then you have Savoy Truffle. Then you got Revolution, the singles one from Past Masters, which was the first Beatles song I ever heard. So I really wanted to have that sort of homage in there. Then we have Your Blues, which was just the instrumental version. I wanted to close it out. Begin to close it out with another instrumental track. And then I come to Child of Nature, which is a demo, which eventually would become Jealous Guy, one of John Lennon's bigger tracks. So you can kind of see the favoritism of John in here in Julia, Child of Nature. But I also wanted to include the greatest hits of the other Beatles in there too, besides Ringo. So While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Obla D, all that stuff is still in there. And then you have homages to kind of the lesser recognized works that really didn't make the final cut of the White Album. So like I said, this one is really weird to unpack because a lot of what I did was spur of the moment. As we explained at the beginning, this episode was very, it was not what we planned to do this weekend. So I didn't really have a lot of time to think it through. But listening back on it, I really enjoyed it because, I imagine myself like listening to this whole thing like in a car ride, like I wanted to chill out with Good Night and then immediately bust into something like Helter Skelter and like just, make myself go crazy. So I don't know if this list was formatted for a good listening experience, but it was formatted for the way I like to consume albums, which is not always listening to it in the proper order. So I don't know. What do you guys have to say? I'm expecting some critique here.
I feel as though you have spat in my face. No, but seriously, when I posed this idea as our mini quarantine episode, this is not what I expected at all. And I was very confused. And I would honestly have to sit with it a few times to try and get what you're trying to do here. But I commend the use of rarities. Obviously, I commend the use of alternate mixes as well. There's lots of great resources that we didn't totally get into. I mean, there were a few tracks that were non-album singles that were recorded around this time that neither Andrew nor I used at all. I only used one alternate take. Andrew didn't use any. So you really used all your resources to create sort of a Frankenstein's monster kind of thing here.
That's what I was going for.
And you succeeded. I would say that.
I wasn't trying to offend you, Ben. I really just wanted to. I think, in an episode like this, I think we should welcome some sort of Frankenstein-ish. Motive, so.
Honestly, I wouldn't have expected anything less from you, Michael. I'm not as deeply offended as Ben is for some reason. This is fine. I'm glad you used Revolution, even though lyrically it's very hollow. Musically, it slaps as hell.
Mhm.
So I will commend you for using that one. It was almost tempting for me to put it in mine as well, but I didn't want to get anything else from mine, so I just kind of left it out. Interesting that you used the instrumental version of Lady Madonna, and not the actual regular single. Is there a reason why you did that?
Yes, and that's because I wanted to contrast the parlor piano and drum and just really highlight the instrumentals, which would eventually come back on Rocky Raccoon. So there was some kind of correlation going on there, but at the end of the day, I've listened to Lady Madonna so many times.
Yeah.
I can sing that song back to front. And sometimes when I'm listening to it nowadays, I just want to hear that piano and I just want to hear that drum combo. So it was really more of a personal thing.
See, that's the interesting thing about yours is that I feel like if you took Andrew's or mine, you could kind of take it and put it in the context of 1968 and say like, here's this, but yours is more of like a companion piece or remix kind of
Yeah.
the stuff we have.
Like I said, I took the point of this episode as literally just compiling our favorite shit from the White Album, and that's what I did. I really wasn't going for a pleasurable listening experience unless you're someone who likes to listen to it like I do, which is kind of all over the place.
And here's what I have to say about to that, Michael. I think that's a pretty admirable way of taking this, because again, I feel, and granted, maybe I'm not like, I just still don't know to this day how I feel about the whole schizophrenic nature of what the White Album's supposed to be. I know I've heard often people describe it as like 4 different, solo records kind of shoved into each other and kind of made a fit. Well, but having this weird Frankenstein's monster. I mean, Ben, I know you're like clowning that, but let's be honest, that's what the White Album is. Like, the White Album already was that in its original state. Like the fact you had like something like Helter Skelter and Julia and Rocky Raccoon and Honey Pie all on the same record says a lot about how like wildly differing, contrasting views the band members had towards the music at this time. And again, does it make it for a cohesive album listening experience? The original? No, it doesn't. Is it still fun? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of filler, and we think I'll kind of remove that. But honestly, this isn't too much of a different, looking at what you have here, this doesn't seem like too much of a different listening experience than what the original had to offer. So commend you for that, Michael, and also for at least having 2 George songs, because he was always shafted from like putting having like more than 2, or in this case 4, because it was a double, songs on a record. So I at least appreciated that.
Right. Well, that's something that's interesting is I hear that criticism a lot, and I tend to agree with it because there's great stuff on All Things Must Pass. But then you look at the 4 songs that he has here, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, obviously instant classic. Long, 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 I love as well. Savoy Truffle, I don't like, but y'all 2 did, so that's cool. But then why is Piggies one of the 4 George songs on the album?
I agree. I don't, instrumentally, like I said, I like it. I think it was like a harpsichord or something. I appreciated like the little like weird eccentricities that they kind of like layered throughout that song. But yeah, lyrically, it's really half-baked. It's some sort of like critique on like upper class, like bourgeoisie kind of living. It's like, cool. Why are we repeating songs about pigs? I get it, they're pigs, but Jesus, it's like if like, I don't know, a rich 30-something-year-old dude wrote the lyrics to this one. Oh wait, that's who did it. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I don't think any of this stuff he put on there was bad. But I agree. You know, there's a. It's interesting because he had so much. The reason why All Things Must Pass, his first solo record, proper solo record, I should say, was so long is because he had so much back. It had such a huge back catalog of songs you couldn't release because the Beatles were because John and Paul had such a monopoly over the songwriting process. And it is interesting that these were like the four of all the songs he probably had written by that point. These are the four that went on the record. I do agree, Ben. It's a bit of an interesting choice.
So
For
it
me, choosing between choosing if Piggies was going to be on there is another thing I had to reckon with while putting this together, because to me, a lot of these songs sort of echo each other and give me the same feelings as maybe two or three others.
mhm.
So having Piggies immediately followed up with Rocky Raccoon, I on the original album, I love both of those songs, but they sort of give me the same vibes. They're both really experimental with their instrumentation. They're both kind of singing in an abstract way with abstract lyricism. So I wanted to sort of choose between those two. And when it comes down to it, I prefer Rocky Raccoon. The same thing happened with if I was going to include Blackbird on my list. I love Blackbird, but Julia does the same thing for me,
Hmm.
and it's a John song. I mean,
I mean,
at the end of the day, that's what it came down to.
right.
So on the piggies thing, that's my stance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to ignore the fact that you just said that Julia is better than Blackbird, essentially. Um, but I tend to echo the same thing. Like in looking at my notes for this that I wrote up today, for example, I didn't include Your Blues while two of you at least had some version of that. And I, having the benefit of hindsight, didn't put it in because I was like, oh, I know that the year after this comes out, I Want You, She's So Heavy is going to do a similar concept, but a lot better, in my opinion. So I can keep that out because I know that there's something coming that's going to be better. And then, yeah, across the album, like you have stuff like Martha, My Dear ends up doing kind of a similar thing to Honey Pie. There's just there are repeated motifs for all the randomness. And in looking at all three of our versions overall, in a way to sort of end this segment, um, I think it's interesting that I feel like mine I was kind of trying to make it as cohesive of an album as possible. Andrew was kind of trying to keep the weirdness while cutting the crap. And then Michael was sort of the one who kept the original White Album listening experience most intact by just making it the most jarring thing possible. so,
I'll take that as a compliment.
so I don't know. It really, it is it's each of our crafts, and it does sort of give a little bit of our personality when you sit down with each of these versions of the album.
For sure. I think, Andrew, do we have anything else to discuss before Rex?
No, other than well,
Right.
Ben wanted to talk about whether or not the White Album should have been a double or a single record LP. Correct, Ben?
Yeah, so just a last thing to sort of sum up everything we've talked about is I think that it's in times like this with the White Album and times like the Clash's Sandinista, lots of times albums grow really big and then there's stuff that maybe shouldn't be there. So what I figured we should discuss a little bit is, should this be as long as it is? Should this be a double album at all, or is there a way to cut it down to a single album that keeps it still very satisfying? What does anyone think about that? Should this be a double album? Should this be a single album?
I think the fact that it took us so much thought and so much time and so much effort to process what we would include shows that the White Album coming out as it did in that time is the only way it can be presented. I think it's pretty like subjective to say it can be condensed down into just a 40 minute thing, you know? I think at the end of the day, the Beatles knew what they were doing at the time. They knew that they were going to present this sort of Frankenstein-esque art piece, and it sticks around in that same way. I can't view the White Album in any other capacity, even after getting the cool listening experiences that you both put together. I don't know. That's kind of my opinion.
Yeah. For me, I'm definitely on the fence. I'm kind of trying to figure out how I feel because I look at, something like my version because I made it and I'm like, well, I can see this working. And then I look at this other list I have of stuff that we all left out. There's a half hour of songs that we all left out in some capacity, both versions of Revolution. We didn't use Revolution 1 or 9. We didn't use Sexy Sadie. Everybody's got something to hide except me and my monkey, Mother Nature's Son, Birthday, Don't Pass Me By, Piggies, or Wild Honey Pie. So, in terms of what we did, there's a half hour of material on the White Album that doesn't need to be there or that isn't essential. However, I was thinking about it, and if these songs had been chopped off and had this been a single LP, when I looked at when I was, they did the big reissue in 2018 where they put out all the bonus tracks. If I heard Don't Pass Me By as a bonus track, I would be like, oh, that's interesting, whatever. I'd hear it once and I'd never listen to it again. But because it's a part of the White Album, it's got all these songs that none of us even used have kind of a place in the cultural lexicon just because they were on a Beatles album. And I guess in closing with that, I don't think I would really want the White Album to be any other way just because there are not very many Beatles albums, and I think we should just kind of appreciate what we have, which is something that we've all learned a lot within the last year. Andrew, what do you think?
That's a very interesting way of putting it. But in terms of like going on what you said, man, talking about how there's so many, there are, like you said, like 9 or so tracks that we all kind of left off this record. In fact, some of you even introduced alternate takes. Of certain songs from the record. It just feels, like there is stuff that could have been at least cut. I don't know if to a point where it should have been a single, version of it per se, but a single album version of it per se. But I still think that the record should have been at least trimmed down a bit. I think this is a little too much excess, even for the Beatles, as far as what was ultimately presented. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't make too many drastic changes from what it was before. Like, there was to a point where I was writing the songs like, oh, but I actually do like the song. I don't really want to cut it, but I had to just fit the length. If it was at least like an hour and 10 minutes, that would be perfectly fine. I don't think it needs to be an hour and a half.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good middle ground to look at it with. And it definitely is a mini episode. We're only at like 45 minutes right now. And we're about to get into recommendations. I'm sort of looking around for mine right now. So does someone else want to go first?
Yeah, I'll front up real quick. Yeah, now we can finally listen to some music that won't be copyrighted on YouTube. But yeah, my first track, I am going to recommend Joni Mitchell again, but not the stuff that you usually hear. I wanted to recommend this particular song called The Jungle Line because I came on in the car a few days ago and I was sort of like, this is a Joni Mitchell song. It starts out with these crazy like bass boosted drums, and then I start listening to the rest of the record and you hear her start experimenting with electronics and weird instrumentation, and it just turned into like a fantastic experience for me, and I want other people to kind of experience that too. So this won't be the Joni Mitchell that you Thank you, Ben.
Go on.
Go ahead and give it a listen. All I have to say.
Rousseau walks on trumpet pads, safaris to the heart of all that jazz. Through eye bars and girders, through wires and pipes, the mathematic circuits of the modern nights. Through huts, through Harlem, through jails and gospel pews, through the class on Park and the trash on Vine, through Europe and the deep, deep heart of Dixie Blue. savage progress cuts the jungle line.
I own that. I own that album, and I've never listened to it, and that's what's on it. Oh my
Yeah,
god,
it's fantastic.
sounds like Joni Mitchell with like the silver apples or something.
Wow, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it's certainly not the Joni Mitchell I know. So yeah, very cool. I do believe it is my turn. And we already, thanks to Ben and his immaculate podcast producing, we already heard a bit of it. So
Yeah, that's staying in.
It's taken.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we already heard a bit of this weird psychedelic trippy song a bit. We have the song Some Sunsick Day by neo-folk artist Morgan Delt. I don't know where he comes from in the country. I don't know how old he is or much about him. All I know is he does neo-folk stuff. Slightly folky, so new psych stuff, I should say. It's mostly psychedelic rock, but there's some folk twinges to it. I think even the Spotify biography of his, it even says that he kind of draws some early Pink Floyd, which you can definitely hear in his stuff. I think it's really interesting. He's not exactly this song in particular is not exactly an obscure track. In fact, I think it has over 11 million monthly listens. But he himself, his other stuff doesn't seem to really break the 1 million mark too much monthly listens. So he's just obscure enough in my eyes to play. And also, if any song was going to play from him, it'd have to be this one because it's just gorgeous. So here we go. Some Sunsick Day.
Take two.
That's a save.
No doubt. I think I knew that song in like high school. And it just isn't saved on my Spotify right now, so I don't know what happened to it, but yeah, that's excellent.
Nice rec.
Mm-hmm. As I don't know if I've actually mentioned it on the show, but it's probably not a secret considering our new U.S.S.R cruise question that has already been immediately abandoned. But I've been slowly listening through all of U.S.S.R recently. And I haven't heard a lot of demos. I have heard demos of stuff that should have come out on albums in place of other horrible tracks, which seems to be a thing that U.S.S.R does very consistently. But something I'm bringing today is a Rivers Cuomo demo that I found very interesting because, to me, one of my favorite artists is a man named Mike Kroll, who I've talked about, I think, once specifically on this show, which was on our decade wrap-up episode from a few seasons ago. And his first two albums have a very homemade sound to them. And this Rivers Cuomo demo called Paper Face that I'm about to play for you sounds a lot like his stuff to me. It's the only time I've heard Rivers sound like this. And I don't know, it really appealed to me because of that. And I found it very, very interesting. So I'm going to play a little bit of this demo, Paper Face.
Away 2,000 miles, didn't stop until she hit New
Definitely, it has all of the artifacting and dropouts that something recorded on a cassette recorder does. The lyrics are a little suspect, but as always, that melody is just perfect. I love the chorus. I love the verse. It sounds great.
I have a question, Ben, about this
Yes.
track.
Yeah.
Do you think Rivers would go on the Weezer cruise?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Oh, Andrew, I have a question for you. So from 2009 to 2014, there was something called the Weezer Cruise. And I was just wondering, I'm kind of having deja vu, but would you go on that?
What material? Well, here's the thing, though. The record they released in 2009 was Gratitude.
Of course.
Awful, terrible record that no one should ever listen to. So if that's the stuff they're playing on it, no.
So here's what I'm getting. Andrew would go on the Rivers cruise,
The Weezer
and
Cruise.
Rivers would not go on the Weezer cruise.
Andrew.
Well, kinda actually, because the reason I brought up Gratitude, I made that point again because it's interesting because the records you pulled is from the collection. You pulled the song Paper Face from Ben. On Alone 2, there is a version of Can't Stop Partying from Gratitude, which is like the big single, and it is awful. Probably the worst Weezer song ever. However, Michael, are you okay?
Andrew Mullen, everybody. Let's give a round of applause.
Let me finish. There is an acoustic version of Can't Stop Partying that's actually really good. Like,
Wow.
if you want an example of like the most night and day altering versions between two songs, how much of a difference approach and style can make a song better. Seriously. Even if you hate, Can't Stop Partying, like every sane person should, go check out the acoustic version from the Alone 2 collection. It's actually really good.
Okay, so at this point, Andrew would still not go on the Weezer Cruise. Is that what I'm to understand?
What are they playing? What material are they playing?
All I know is I think they were playing everything because it's just Weezer fans on there, so they're dipping into the rare stuff. And I've seen a video of Rivers Cuomo reading his diary from when he wrote Pinkerton on stage for like an hour. Don't you want to hear that?
Care. That's not the music. I don't care.
Don't you want to hear that though?
No, I don't care. I don't want to hear this man's personal business.
Well,
I'm trying to relax.
End this Rivers Cuomo Weezer tangent that will now be featured on every episode. I must say, if you go to the Rivers Cuomo website, there are like 3,000 demos that you can buy. There's a demos collection for each period of Weezer stuff. And there's like 1,000 Everything Will Be All Right in the End albums or demos that you can buy for $9. So if you're some sort of insane person, you can go spend like $100 on Rivers Cuomo's website and have basically every note he's ever recorded. So there you go. I think that's it.
Okay. Lessons of this episode: Beatles, White Album, Weezer, Cruise.
Beezer.
Next week, we're going to hopefully be doing some record roulette, which is what we set out to do. Tune in for that. Tune in to Soundcheck. What do we say at the end of every episode, boys?
Good night,
Detroit.
On the way I picked my bag was on my knee. God, I had a chance to fight. I'm back in the U.S.S.R. You don't have lucky you are born back in the U.S.S.R. I've been away so long I had to do the place. God, it's good to be back home. I leave it till tomorrow to unpack my case. Baby, disconnect the phone. I'm back in the U.S.S.R.